My friends, I want to speak to you today about something many of you feel but few talk about: the pain, the ache, the weight of being alone. But not just any loneliness. I'm speaking about the kind that comes with being called by God. If you've ever felt different, set apart, misunderstood, or even abandoned, you're not alone. In fact, you may be among the chosen. When God places His hand on a life, something changes, quietly, invisibly, and permanently. There is a weight, a shift in atmosphere, a divine restlessness that begins to stir in the soul. The chosen begin to feel that they no longer belong where they used to. Friends seem distant, conversations feel shallow, and the places that once brought joy no longer satisfy. It is not because they are better than others, but because they are being set apart for something higher. The calling of God creates a distinction. It causes one to be marked, to be different, not by choice, but by assignment. In the Bible, we are said that God told Abraham to leave his country, his people, and even his father's household, to go to a land he didn't even know. The first step of his journey with God was separation. It wasn't about geography, it was about identity. Abraham had to disconnect from what was familiar in order to be connected to what was divine, and many times God will not reveal the next step until the first step, separation, is taken. The chosen are often called to walk away from comfort before they are called into destiny. This pattern repeats itself throughout Scripture. When Moses encountered God at the burning bush, he was alone. He had been separated from Egypt, from power, from identity, even from his own people. He was a man in the wilderness, uncertain, broken, and wandering. Yet it was in that place of isolation that God spoke his name and gave him purpose. The wilderness became the womb of his calling. What looked like rejection was in fact selection. Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers and sold into slavery. Before he wore a robe of rulership, he wore chains of betrayal. But in Bible we are said that what was meant for evil, God turned for good. Joseph's separation wasn't a detour. It was preparation. He had to be isolated to be elevated. God had to remove him from his surroundings to develop the kind of character and faith that could carry the weight of leadership. Even the prophet Elijah was called to leave the crowds and hide by the brook, where he was fed by ravens. The miracles didn't start in the palace. They started in the quiet. And when he stood on the mountain and God passed by, it wasn't in the wind or the fire or the earthquake, but in a still, small voice. The separation was necessary so he could hear. This is the mystery of the calling. It pulls you away before it launches you forward. It isolates before it elevates. It strips before it crowns. God does not call the chosen into noise. He draws them into silence, not to leave them there, but to mold them there. The chosen are separated so they can be sanctified, refined, and made ready for something that eyes have not seen and ears have not heard. The loneliness is not a sign of abandonment. It is a sign of appointment. There is a depth in God that cannot be found in crowds. It's not discovered in noise, in applause, or in public affirmation. It is found in the secret place, in the quiet corners where no one sees but God. Many desire to be used by Him, to walk in power, to speak with authority, but few are willing to endure the stillness where that authority is born. In Bible we are said that Jesus often withdrew to lonely places to pray. Even the Son of God, carrying the fullness of divinity, needed solitude to commune with the Father. He did not build his strength on platforms. He built it in prayer, in the wilderness, in the quiet. The deeper your relationship with God, the more He will call you away from the distractions that dilute your spirit. There are things He wants to whisper that cannot be heard over the constant noise of the world. There are truths He wants to reveal that won't be grasped until everything else is stripped away. And so He gently leads His chosen into isolation, not to punish, but to prepare. In Bible we are said that when Moses met with God on Mount Sinai, he was alone. The cloud of God's glory covered the mountain, and no one else could enter. For 40 days and 40 nights, Moses was shut in with the presence of God, receiving instruction, revelation, and purpose. That kind of encounter does not happen in the middle of a crowd. It requires the shutting of doors, the silencing of voices, the stilling of everything else. David, the man after God's own heart, learned to worship in fields where no one clapped. His psalms were written not in palaces but in caves, in valleys, in places of desperation. He sang not for attention but for survival. His deepest cries to God were born in isolation. In those hidden places he learned the sound of God's voice and the rhythm of his heart. And it was there that God molded him, not with the approval of men, but with the pressure of purpose. Paul the Apostle, after his dramatic encounter with Christ, did not immediately begin preaching. In Bible we are said that he spent time in Arabia, in solitude, in study, in obscurity, before he wrote letters that would shape the church, before he stood before kings and proclaimed the gospel. He sat in silence, letting the Spirit of God unravel and remake him. That silence wasn't wasted, it was sacred. It was in those unseen years that he was rooted in truth, built in strength, and prepared for the weight of his assignment. There is a cost to depth. It's the cost of company, of comfort, of constant affirmation. But the reward is communion with God at a level few ever experience. The chosen ones walk this road not because they want to be alone, but because the God who called them waits for them in the solitude. And once you've heard his whisper, once you've tasted that nearness, the loneliness begins to feel like holy ground. When God marks a person for something extraordinary, the world rarely celebrates it. More often it resists it. The chosen ones are set apart, not only by what they carry, but by how they are perceived. There is something about the anointing that makes others uncomfortable, not because of arrogance or superiority, but because light alwa exposes darkness, and when a person carries the light of God, those who live in shadows will feel uneasy. In Bible we are said that Jesus came to his own, and his own did not receive him. The Son of God walked among men, healing the sick, raising the dead, speaking truth, and yet they rejected him, mocked him, accused him, and ultimately crucified him, not because he did wrong, but because they could not comprehend the power and purity that flowed through him. The chosen ones often live misunderstood. They speak differently, dream differently, move to a rhythm not of this world. Their values don't align with culture. Their priorities seem strange. They resist compromise. They don't chase what others chase, and because of this, the world turns cold toward them. In Bible, we are said that the natural man does not accept the things of the Spirit, for they are foolishness to him. What is sacred to the chosen may seem strange to others. What is obedience to God may look like rebellion to people. And so, isolation becomes part of the journey, not because the chosen walk away, but because others pull back. Noah was told to build an ark in a time when rain had never fallen. He obeyed the voice of God, hammering and building with faith while the people around him laughed. Day after day he looked like a madman to a world that didn't understand the warning he carried. But when the skies broke open and the flood came, his obedience was vindicated. Until then he endured ridicule. The world often mocks what it will one day need. Joseph dreamed dreams given by God, and even his own brothers despised him for it. He was thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, falsely accused, and forgotten, all because he carried something that others couldn't grasp. But in Bible we are said that God was with Joseph, even in prison, and when the time was right, the same world that rejected him came to him for rescue. This is the path of the chosen. Rejection is not uncommon. They are misread, misjudged, and mislabeled. The same fire that draws God near can push others away, but it is not a sign of failure. It is a confirmation of purpose. The world doesn't always know what to do with someone who refuses to bow to its systems, who doesn't speak its language, who lives with eyes fixed on heaven. In the same way the prophets were stoned, the apostles were beaten, and the early church was persecuted. Those who carry the message of truth will often be treated as strangers in their own land. The rejection isn't personal, it's spiritual. It isn't about who you are, but whose you are. There is a season in every chosen one's life where it seems as if everything slows down, closes in, or falls silent. Doors that were once open begin to shut. People who used to walk closely begin to drift away. Opportunities that seemed within reach begin to vanish like mist. It feels like a setback, like a wilderness, like the quiet before something unknown, but what looks like delay is often divine design. God is not denying destiny, He is preparing the vessel. In Bible we are said that before a great house is filled with treasure, the foundation must be deep and secure. And so God begins His greatest work in hidden places. The chosen are pulled away, not out of rejection but for refinement. Before David ever held a sword, he held a shepherd's staff. While his brothers were paraded before the prophet, David was tending sheep on the backside of a field, forgotten by men but seen by God. That field was not a detour, it was a training ground. It was where he learned to fight lions and bears, where he wrote songs to the Lord, where he grew in courage and learned the heart of a servant. When the time came to face Goliath, it was not armor that made him ready, it was the years of quiet preparation. Moses was raised in the palace of Pharaoh, surrounded by royalty, trained in wisdom and power. But when the time came for God to shape him into a deliverer, He didn't do it in Egypt. He took Moses into the wilderness for 40 years. A man once mighty in speech became slow of tongue. A man once full of confidence became hesitant and humble. It was in the solitude of the desert that Moses learned to listen. It was there he met God at the burning bush, barefoot and broken, no longer relying on human strength. The wilderness stripped him of everything, so that when God sent him back to Egypt, he didn't go in his own name, but in the name of I am. Even Jesus, before he began his public ministry, was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. For 40 days he fasted, prayed, and was tested. He had just heard the voice of the Father say, "This is my beloved Son," and yet he was not sent into crowds, but into isolation. It was in the quiet that his identity was confirmed, his strength was tested, and his authority was established. Preparation requires space. God will often remove the noise so you can hear. He will take you out of comfort so you can grow. He will hide you so He can form you. In Bible we are said that unless a seed falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. There is a kind of dying that happens in the quiet seasons, a dying to self, to ambition, to pride. And from that soil God brings forth fruit that lasts. There is a weight that comes with seeing what others cannot see. When God gives vision to a person, He is not just showing them something for inspiration. He is entrusting them with responsibility. Vision is not just revelation, it is burden. It keeps you awake at night. It stirs you when others are at rest. It compels you to walk roads no one else understands, and to build things no one else sees the need for. It is not glamorous, it is not always celebrated, it is often lonely. In Bible we are said that where there is no vision, the people perish, but the one who receives vision often feels isolated, because they carry what others have not yet been shown. Noah was given a vision of a flood before a drop of rain ever fell from the sky. He was commanded to build an ark, a massive vessel of safety and obedience, while the world around him mocked and laughed. Day after day he followed divine blueprints for something no one else believed in. It took years of labor, years of ridicule, years of questions. He looked like a fool to the world, but a hero in the eyes of heaven. The burden of vision made him a builder, not just of wood, but of obedience. He wasn't just building an ark, he was building legacy, salvation, and faithfulness in action. Joseph, while still a teenager, received dreams that showed him rising in influence and leadership, but those dreams turned into a nightmare. His brothers hated him for the vision he carried. They threw him into a pit, sold him into slavery, and tried to bury his destiny. Yet everywhere Joseph went, the vision followed him. Even in prison, he interpreted dreams. Even in chains, he spoke what he saw. And in time, the vision came to pass, not without pain, not without betrayal, but exactly as God had said. In Bible we are said that the vision waits for an appointed time. Though it tarry, wait for it will surely come. Joseph held on through darkness because he knew what God had shown him in the light. The burden of vision makes the chosen restless among the content, uncomfortable among the satisfied. It causes them to move when others are still, to prepare when nothing seems urgent, to pray when others are sleeping. Visionaries are often seen as intense, misunderstood, too focused, or too spiritual. But what people see as intensity, God sees as stewardship. The weight they carry is not just for them, it is for generations to come. In Bible we are said that eyes have not seen and ears have not heard the things God has prepared for those who love Him. But sometimes He lets His chosen catch a glimpse, and that glimpse changes everything. It becomes their compass, their fuel, their reason to keep going when giving up would be easier. The vision becomes both fire and cross-igniting purpose, but also demanding sacrifice. There are dimensions of God's presence that are only discovered in the silence. Not the silence of a room, but the silence of the soul, the kind that comes when every other voice has faded, when the noise of the world no longer fills the heart, and when the chosen find themselves alone not by accident, but by divine design. Solitude is not punishment for the called, it is preparation for revelation. There are things God cannot say when we are surrounded. There are whispers meant only for the ears of those who have been separated, set apart, pulled away into places where there is no one to impress and nothing left to prove. In Bible, we are said that God speaks in a still, small voice. That voice is not heard in chaos, but in quietness. Moses climbed the mountain alone and entered the thick cloud where God was. He left behind the noise of the camp, the demands of the people, and the distractions of the valley. It was in that cloud, thick with mystery and fire, that God revealed His glory. Moses asked to see God's face, to know Him more deeply, and God responded not with a crowd, but with presence. That moment wasn't built for spectators. It was designed for one heart and one God, meeting in sacred space. The deeper the encounter, the more private it becomes. Jacob was left alone at night, wrestling with what he didn't understand, his past behind him, his fears before him. He stood at a crossroad. And it was there, in the dark, that God came in the form of a man and wrestled with him until daybreak. Jacob didn't just wrestle with circumstances, he wrestled with God, and in that solitude something shifted. His name was changed, his identity was transformed. In Bible we are said that those who seek Him with all their heart will find Him. Jacob found God when no one else was looking. Jesus, before choosing His disciples, withdrew to a mountain alone to pray. Before the cross, He went into the Garden of Gethsemane, leaving even His closest friends behind while He fell on His face and cried out to the Father. Heaven's greatest strength often comes in moments when the soul is stripped bare and stands alone before its Creator. It's in that place that God speaks not just to the mind, but to the core of a person's being. The chosen are led into solitude not for separation from people, but for connection to God. What feels like isolation is often invitation. God draws near in the secret place, the quiet place, the lonely place, because there He has our full attention. In Bible we are said that when you go into your room and shut the door, pray to your Father who is unseen, and He will reward you in the open. The unseen place becomes the birthplace of strength. The lonely road becomes holy ground, and those who walk it will find not just clarity, but communion, not just answers, but presence, not just direction, but intimacy with the one who called them. The path of the chosen is not always lined with celebration or surrounded by crowds. It is often a quiet road, marked by separation, solitude, and deep spiritual wrestling. But in that loneliness, God is near. He shapes, refines, and speaks in ways that only the stillness can allow. Rejection, isolation, and burden are not signs of abandonment. They are marks of divine purpose. In Bible we are said that many are called, but few are chosen. The chosen ones walk differently because they are led differently. Their silence is not empty, it is filled with whispers from heaven. Their isolation is not void, it is the sanctuary of encounter. And though the journey may be lonely, it is never without meaning, for in every step God walks with them, drawing them closer to Himself, preparing them for what only they were created to carry. The loneliness is sacred, the calling is holy.